Welcome back to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio. We put this program together here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy each and every week so that you have better armaments as those seek to shout down, unfortunately, the discussion over real issues that real people need to find solutions to our problems. Chronicled, as we did, the story of the downturn in SOL scores yet again across the Commonwealth, bringing back the issue of education in Virginia. And if you're enjoying this, go to our YouTube channel after the fact. You'll find podcast episodes of all of these programs of Freedom and Prosperity Radio. Joining us from the Heritage Foundation Center for Education Policy, back on the program to, unfortunately, talk about an issue that we really wish we could make some headway on, is Lindsey Burk. Lindsey, welcome back to Freedom and Prosperity Radio. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me back.
Like so many things, after 12 years of doing this, you'd think we'd be making some headway in it. I remember when they started trying to come up with a way to grapple educational choice in the Commonwealth, and I was warned that the General Assembly would pass something that was just slightly more salacious than kissing your sister and then say, no, we've dealt with that already. And it didn't work, funny enough, but you wrote a great piece, heritage.org, universal school choice needed, and talking about addresses determining your educational achievement level. Our school districts, inner city especially, still struggle for all of the machinations of our educational boards. What is still standing in our way of trying this?
Well, there are quite a few things. One, I would say, is simply inertia. We've done things the same way for more than 100 years now, and so we have this deeply ingrained thought process that says, well, we're going to assign children to government-run schools based largely on their zip code, which means based on where their parents can afford to buy a home, and we are effectively going to give them zero choices unless their parents can afford to pay twice, once for their local property taxes and then again for private school tuition if they're not happy with their child's assigned public school.
Right.
And so unless you're able to do that, you're really limited in the options that are available, particularly in Virginia, which has very few charter schools, which is sort of the low bar, right? And not in terms of quality, but in terms of the school choice landscape. I mean, these are just public schools that can operate with a little more autonomy to meet the needs of families. Very few charter schools in the state. Practically speaking, little, if any, private school choice programs available to families, a very modest tax credit scholarship program. So families are really out of luck unless they can do what I just described, which is to pay twice, which is fundamentally unfair.
Well, and this is something that has grown out of the idea that we've all agreed ostensibly that we want to put together a way to educate our kids while we're working, and I get it. But you're talking off of a campaign that still looks at the fact that we spend anywhere between $8,000 to $15,000 a year educating a kid. We put the entry-level employees in front of their classroom and say, well, we don't know why the test scores aren't higher. We throw all this money at it. But if a parent, even if you didn't give them a dollar-for-dollar scholarship or a school choice voucher, they could go a long way towards, if it's $10,000, you give them $8,000 or anything along that line, they could actually choose. And we found that where this is taking place, Lindsey, if I'm not mistaken, it's even made the remaining public schools better.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We have solid evidence that that's the case. We have robust empirical evidence that demonstrates that as more and more private schools start to surround a given district school and as families have additional choices, that the children who choose to stay in the district system, we actually see their outcomes improve as well as the outcomes of the students who are exercising choice. And so something you said just now, I mean, if you think about the amount of money that we are spending on public education per child, you know, anywhere, as you said, from $8,000 to $15,000. I mean, imagine, let's just pick a round number, $10,000. Imagine we gave families total control over all of that money from kindergarten through through 12th grade. That means 13 years of schooling. That means over $130,000 that a family could control. Imagine what you could do for your child's education with $130,000. You could do a heck of a lot more than the district system that's assigning students and really, for the most part, knows very little about the individual needs and wants and desires and hopes and aspirations of your child. Being able to direct those dollars, we know it's proven to have a much stronger impact on a child's future life trajectory and outcomes than government-assigned schooling.
Lindsey Burk is on with us from the Center for Education Policy at the Heritage Foundation. We're talking about a great piece she's written on school choice most recently, but she's been working at this. Well, she's only 24 years old, so she's. But Lindsey, this is one of those head scratchers. Is it really as simple as it's elected officials wanting to have that power play of? I say it this way: we have your children. Here are our demands. When people are told we need to pay higher taxes, it's usually based off of our schools need X, Y, Z. We need a bond referendum to build this onto the schools. Our schools with 13 kids per classroom are overcrowded, et cetera, et cetera. It seems like it is just the easy sales pitch to wrest more tax dollars out of residents.
Yeah, I think that's typically the case. And when you survey families across the country, when you survey individual Americans and you ask them what they think we spend on average on public education, they vastly underestimate the amount that we spend per child. And then when you reveal that actually on average it's about $12,000 per child per year across the country, then there's support for increasing taxes and increasing spending in the public system declines significantly. And look, I mean, to get back to this issue of tying schooling to housing, which is really what we've done, if we sort of boil it down to its essence, what is fundamentally unfair is that exact nexus. It is that housing policy has become school policy. We need to separate the financing of education from the delivery of services. And look, Redfin, the housing brokerage firm, put out about a year and a half ago an analysis of what families pay per square foot of a home to move to a more highly rated school district. And what they were able to do, what Redfin did, was they looked at twin houses, so houses that were exactly the same in terms of square footage and the number of bathrooms and bedrooms and all else being equal, the only difference being that they were a mile away, less than a mile away in a more highly rated school district. Families paid $50 more per square foot for houses just over the line in a better school district.
That adds up.
It's a real issue. We know that housing policy has become school policy, and until we separate the two, we will continue to see a fundamentally unequal, unequitable system that fails to improve outcomes long term. You cannot improve outcomes within a monopoly. You need some choice and competition to make that happen.
Well, your humble host was the lone conservative voice, it seemed, in a panel on CBS News not all that long ago as we approached the August 12th anniversaries in Charlottesville. And the subject of redlining came up, and packing urban schools with families, and it really, if you wanted to win over a huge part of the Democratic Party base, just point out that this kind of school policy is a vestige of the Jim Crow era, Byrd administration, Byrd machine body politic, and it really is sort of passive aggressive redlining still.
Yeah, and look, I mean, this is a winning issue when you talk to both conservatives and folks on the left. When you talk to families across the political spectrum, they understand that there is fundamentally nothing more important than the education available to their children, and that there is such inequity in assigning a kid to a brick-and-mortar school building just because it happens to fit within their zip code. And until, again, we break that link, we're going to see continued stagnation. And when we talk about things like education choice, we mean access to options like charter schools, like education savings accounts, which are in 5 states now, enabling families to control the money that would have been spent on their child in the public school. So, it could be $6,000 a year or more than that. and enabling them to pay private school tuition, to hire a private tutor for their child with special needs, to hire special education services and therapists, and to roll over unused funds year to year into a college savings account. I mean, families in these states like North Carolina and Arizona and Florida, are able to completely customize their child's education. Virginia is going to be in a position pretty soon where it can look around at the neighboring states and see massive innovation in education happening. Tennessee has education savings accounts. North Carolina has education savings accounts. Virginia is going to see this opportunity pass it by unless it moves out of this idea that the only way to deliver public education is through government-run schools.
Lindsey, we have what I used to call the grandfather of all Blaine amendments, but then I realized I should call it the founding father of all Blaine amendments, the Virginia Act for Religious Freedom, that the anti-school choice crowd in Virginia always points to and says, see, you can't give tax money to church groups, and that's what you'd be doing. But you bring up the educational savings accounts, and those really are brilliantly built around stuff that's already done in the government when it comes to SNAP and other things, where the monies go to the parent and then the parent chooses after that. So the government is not technically giving money to a parochial school somewhere down the line. Am I overstating it, understating it? What it is?
You're exactly right. And this is something that the U.S. Supreme Court has acknowledged in the Zellman v. Simmons-Harris case, that the government is not providing money to schools or to religiously based organizations, that the funding goes to the family, who is then making an independent choice about where to direct those dollars. And the ESA option I described earlier that is operational in Arizona, it was challenged at the state court level, and it withheld that challenge because they said in Arizona there's that additional layer with ESAs where since you can direct every single penny in your child's account to multiple education services and products and providers, it's clearly not the government supporting some type of religious institution. The other thing that's exciting to watch, so regardless, I hear it about Virginia all the time that it has, like you described it, the grandfather of all Blaine amendments. Well, that might not even be the case a year from now. The Supreme Court has just decided to take up the Espinoza case, which originated in Montana. Montana has a very modest tax credit scholarship program that provides $150 to families via a scholarship granting organization. Those families can then use that to offset the cost of private school tuition. Well, Montana has tried to block them from using it at any sort of religious-based school, at a Catholic school or whatever a family might select. Well, that was challenged. The Supreme Court announced in July that it would take up that case in the next term, so we will actually have the Supreme Court for the first time considering outright whether or not Blaine amendments violate the Constitution, which, if it goes the way one hopes, could overturn these amendments in all of the 37 states that still have them in place.
Federally, does the president's administration get it? I thought they did, but yet it's been a couple of years. Where is their support for such a thing going on, or are they really leaving it up to the states, Lindsey?
Yeah, so the administration is incredibly supportive of school choice. Generally speaking, it is a 180-degree difference from where the Obama administration was on the issue. So that has been incredibly welcome. There are opportunities at the federal level to advance school choice in ways that are actually appropriate at the federal level. There's not a lot you can do, quite frankly, at the federal level that's appropriate and constitutional when it comes to advancing school choice. But for military families, there's an opportunity there. For turning the District of Columbia into an entirely universally based school choice system, there's an opportunity there. There's opportunities for the federal government to advance school choice on tribal lands with Native American communities. So outside of those three populations, though, the federal government's pretty limited in what it can do. The Trump administration, though, rhetorically has just been wonderfully supportive of education choice, and that has really been welcome news.
Well, I remember the famous story of his Barack Obama's daughters, Malia and Sasha, who went to the president and they were going to cut D.C.'s school voucher program, and they said, "Dad, why are half of our friends having to leave school?" But think about what that means. That means here are poor, maybe single-parent children who get to go to school with the children of the President of the United States. How can you say that that is a bad idea?
Yeah, I mean, the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program, the voucher program in the district here, has been just a wild success. These kids, and it's all almost exclusively minority, it's all low-income students, they are graduating at rates 21 percentage points higher than their peers in the control group that they studied. I mean, it's just been phenomenal in its success, and all, by the way, for a fraction of what is spent in D.C. public schools, which spend about $30,000 per child per year, and the voucher is like $8,000 to $12,000 per year.
What do we need to be telling these candidates in 2019 heading for the Virginia General Assembly, Lindsey, as we bring it in for the landing, that in November we're going to, in some cases, contest every seat in the Virginia General Assembly? Are there people talking about this on the stump that we need to really be more supportive of?
So, across the board, no matter who it is, this is an issue, education choice, the right for a family to determine what is best for their children, is something that cuts across the political landscape. We see widespread support among families for it, among the majority of Americans for it, well north of 60% for all types of education choice options, whether that's an ESA, a charter, voucher, tax credit, scholarship. And so this really is a winning issue. Conservatives should understand that it's a winning issue, and it's something that is just I would argue, a moral issue that we should embrace and lead on and be unapologetic about. And the only thing standing in the way today really is both inertia and the teachers' unions. And the teachers' unions are continuing this leftward shift further and further left. You know, you can look at something like their recent vote to say in their referendum that there is a fundamental right to abortion under Roe v. Wade. Why is the NEA engaging in that? It is not an education policy issue. It is moving further and further to the left. Most Americans recognize that. And so moving on policies that have widespread support, like education choice, I think is just a winning issue across the board.
You're absolutely right. And I wish the teachers would understand that if we had this kind of school choice, that invigorates a marketplace for their services and perhaps drives up their salaries. But shh.
That's right.
You know, why mess with their paradigm that they're so comfy in? Lindsey, thank you so much. Again, you could read her stuff. Is it up at now I'm forgetting the online newsletter that the Heritage Foundation puts,
everything
Daily
is up
Signal.
at heritage.org.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was in the Daily Signal or not, but I know you're at heritage.org.
Also there.
And we'll link back to all of this. Thank you so much for what you do, and as with some of our healthcare policy experts as well. One of these days, we're going to have that interview where it's like, "Wow, we finally got here," and we'll toast to actually waking up and smelling the coffee. But thank you so much for again visiting with us this week on Freedom and Prosperity Radio.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for listening. Again, you can get the podcast of this episode if you go to our YouTube channel and search Freedom and Prosperity Radio on YouTube, and follow us at tertiumquids.org. For all of us here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy, until next week, so long, and thanks for all the fish.